The meeting of MUD 46. We're going to begin the meeting by the opening invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all would, please bow your heads. I'm going to say a prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you that you brought us all together here in good health. We ask that you give us a spirit of unity, that we could all work together for the accomplishment of common and shared goals. Lord, we ask that you give us wisdom, bring peace upon us, and guide us with wisdom in today's meeting. We ask these things in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I take flag and pledge allegiance to the United States, one state under God, one and indivisible.
All right, we're on item number 3 of the agenda. We have 2 guests with us today. Do any of you want to speak? Alan? Okay, and we also have Donna? No? You sure? All right. Item number 4, do we have any requests?
Unfortunately, I do. We have one commercial and one residential request. I'll go with the residential request first. It's a large lot, account number 487-650-02. Like I said, it's a large lot. They had a water main line leak. The gallons in question is 191,000. The average is 21,000, so it's the adjustment of 170,000 gallons or a credit of $1,140.35 to their account. They do meet the requirements of your policy. They do have a repair bill in excess of $6,500 to repair their leak, and we are recommending it.
You are recommending, okay. Are they signed up on the WaterSmart?
Are signed up on WaterSmart. They did get the alerts, and if there's a leak out in their yard, between the sprinkler backflow and the house.
All right. Okay, I need a motion to accept.
Make the motion.
Okay, second. Okay, all right, is there any discussion? Okay, let's bring it to a vote. All those in favor?
All right.
All those opposed?
Thank you.
Okay.
The second one is
Motion passes.
account in your district. It's account number 06024001. They also had a line break at their site. I've got some repair pictures and a repair bill. Their gallons in question is 1.32 million. Their average is 702,000. So it would be an adjustment of 626,000 gallons or a refund credit to their account of $5,973.54. They do have a repair bill and repair photographs of the repair, and they do qualify for the adjustment, and we are recommending approval of that adjustment.
And I think just as a reminder, the adjustment is the retail margin. They are still being paid the wholesale rate, so you're not losing that expense, only your profit or margin. In
The repair was over, well, almost $12,000 repair.
Okay.
We are only adjusting your portion, not the wholesale portion.
When these customers call you, do you ask them if they're on the WaterSmart program?
I think that's pretty standard.
That's what we're saying now. We're
Okay.
put that in our, make that a rule, but
All right.
yeah, we do.
And that value you put in, a 5,000 plus value, that's the margin we would lose, not the whole.
All right. Well, I'm going to make a motion that we approve.
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of approving the adjustment to the bill?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the motion passes. Okay.
It's not an adjustment. It's just letting you know that there's a home at 11 Evening Song, Greg Hurstenberger. They owe 3 years of taxes, and I'm just asking if you will know anything about this home or these people, because I'm going to be filing suit.
Okay.
Okay?
Question? Do you already have a lien on the property?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Do we need to act on that?
No, there's no action. I'm just letting you know, bringing information to see if you all have anything that you could share with me that.
Okay.
I'm not
If you
aware.
did, sometimes that helps us guide us in the path forward.
And what was the name?
Craig Herschenberger. 11 Evening Longport. Okay.
Don't know. Okay.
I'm gonna move forward and file suit.
Okay.
And I think you would say you've tried to contact them, no,
Oh,
no,
several times,
they're,
yes.
they're non-responsive to everything we do.
Okay.
So it's kind of a
And
last
you'll
resort.
notice this from the attorneys have gone out, you know, there's a lien on the property every January 1 till they're paid. So, they owe from 19 to 21, and of course, 22 will be delinquent.
3 years. Wow. Okay. All right, moving on, the consent agenda. Does anyone want to pull anything out of the consent agenda? There's several things that we do need to act on, item 9, 10, and I believe 11. Anything else that you want to pull? Okay, I'm just going to go individually, item 5, 6, and 7, and 8 of the consent agenda. I'm going to make a motion that we approve those.
Second. I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. A vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, let's move on to item number 9. Adoption of resolution authorizing an additional penalty on the delinquent personal property taxes and authorize delinquent tax attorney to collect delinquent personal property taxes beginning April 1, 2023, including the filing of lawsuits as necessary. I have one question. How many customers fall into this category?
Nobody yet, because taxes aren't due until January 31st. So we do this in advance of taxes becoming delinquent each year.
Okay.
We have one resolution that you're considering now for personal property. We'll have another resolution in March. This is an annual
Right.
set of items that you'll see on certain months each year. So you'll see one in March for delinquent real property taxes. So the tax code allows you to pass on the fee that's paid to the delinquent tax attorney, which is set by the tax code at a maximum of 20%, and that's what the delinquent tax attorney is paid. By imposing this additional penalty, you're able to be made whole when you collect. So instead of getting 80% of the collection, you get 100% of the collection, and the delinquent taxpayer has to pay the attorney fee. This resolution allows for you to force the delinquent taxpayer to pay the attorney fee. That's as to personal property. We have to do it every year because the tax is imposed every year as a separate levy and lien every year.
And has this changed from previous year?
No, that's why it was on the consent agenda.
Yeah. All
And
right.
I'll provide you with a delinquent tax roll in February, so you'll
Okay.
see the accounts.
Yeah. Okay.
You send a receipt back for the payment of taxes,
No, not let that request, because they can go online and print it.
quick credit.
Okay.
We used to do that, but we don't anymore because there's so many ways to get one.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we adopt the resolution authorizing the additional penalty on delinquent personal property taxes. Do I hear a second?
Here.
Okay. Discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the resolution passes. Item 10, adoption of resolution adopting the list of qualified brokers.
So this is another annual housekeeping item. The list is updated on page 29 of your packet. The changes are based on feedback that we received from Maureen and Jeannie, as well as the other tax assessor collectors and bookkeeper, financial managers that we work with. They provide us with recommendations as to banks that either have been bought out, dissolved, changed their name, or if they just don't want to deal with public funds. On that, for the last few years, with some banks just don't want to deal with the hassle of having to comply with the Public Funds Investment Act. So we do this every year. Of course, this list is not who all we actually do business with, but by law, you can't go and do business with an institution that's not on your list. So we try to cast as wide a net as possible. So if there's a good interest rate on CD or something that comes up from one of these institutions, they're actually on your list and you can get
Does
it.
the state influences?
The state does not influence this list.
And these are FDIC, you should mention.
Yes, they have to have FDIC, and then they have to, anything over 250,000 has to be collateralized with a third-party bank, either a Federal Reserve or a Federal Home Loan Bank. Okay.
All right.
That's all Public Funds Investment Act requirements.
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we adopt the resolution adopting this list of qualified brokers. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right.
2 seconds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the resolution passes. The next one is authorized preparation and submission of district information to Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts as required by section 403 decimal 0241 Texas Government Code and chapter 203 Texas Local Government Code for inclusion in the Special Purpose District Public Information Database.
Another annual item, we're able to comply with this requirement by providing the comptroller with a copy of our most recent audit, as opposed to other political subdivisions that don't fall within that carve out, have to actually prepare separate special purpose district submission report. So we comply with this by authorizing the submittal of our audit to the comptroller.
Okay, does this have anything to do with the presentation that John's going to give later?
That will be our most recent audit.
Okay,
Once it's approved, yes.
all right.
But that's a separate agenda item. That is.
Yeah, that's item number 16. All right. Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we authorize that submission. Right, second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and opposed? Okay, the submission, it's approved by the board. Now, item 12 and 13, we don't need to discuss those. So I'm going to just make a motion that we approve of those. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, 12 and 13 are approved. We're going to move on to the regular agenda. Item 14. We're going to consider an act on the proposal prepared by Director Letterman.
This goes back to August. Jim Stinson, General Manager Stinson, sent out an email on August 12th to Shelley Lawson to distribute the SGRA litigation expenses and future direction. And this was prior to the most recent findings in favor of the SGRA. And at the time that I wrote this and put this together, it was a justification that we need to kind of delve down into the financials and understand what the potential impact and litigation would be to the Woodlands Township and to all the MUDs. To that point, I passed around a copy of Shelley's note, and you should each have one. And additionally, my proposal, which was also just given out, and was in the August meeting package. If you read through the 9 or 10 items that are here, I would like to suggest that we do talk to the SGRA about the litigation, but we have, I think, something a little bit more important that George will be discussing, as well as David, concerning wastewater treatment. And I would rather take this as part of an overall financial review with the SGRA not only of the wastewater treatment strategy, but also of the litigation and what the course of action is. As you could see here in the second to the last item, we're talking millions of dollars a year that is that's not being paid by the city of Conroe and others. And I think that the SGRA has diligently pursued litigation. It is not in general been in favor of the SGRA, but their point is correct. There is a legitimate contract between all the parties. Money should be spent or paid to the SGRA, which in turn takes the pressure off the Woodlands Township, and it's not been done. My concern is, look at this fiscal year, next fiscal year, we're looking at a potential shortfall of an additional $4.2 million per year, which was calculated at the short or no pay amounts of 3,348,000 plus legal costs of an additional 833,000. So what I would like to suggest is maybe roll this proposal into the wastewater treatment as an overall budget review, or if you suggest in a discussion right now, separate this for litigation to discuss and the wastewater treatment financials as two separate items. I'm open to either one.
I like to keep them separate, just because I think that's two distinctive topics.
And I don't disagree with either way. This last sheet, which is the proposal that I've got, that I made at the time, if anyone has any recommendations, suggestions, or adjustments to it, let's talk through it and make those adjustments and publish it to the SJRA asking for action.
One question I've got is,
Yes.
now that this lawsuit's been settled, what's the status of Conroe paying what it owes? Is that automatic?
I didn't think it was settled.
No, that's not, a procedural victory occurred for SJRA. It was not a financial victory.
Let's see.
Well, there needs to be an update. In the breach case, SGRA had a favorable ruling that declared the contract was valid and incontestable. Quadvest Woodland Oaks is appealing that. They're asking for us to, I'll say, approve of the request to appeal. There's a Rule 11 being discussed to say better position SGRA on that request for appeal. In that Rule 11, there is conversation occurring where Quadvest and Woodland Oaks would pay, but they have past funding.
Say that again now. Who's going to pay?
Quadvest and Woodland Oaks, because that's who is in the breach case, because they breached the contract.
And when will they pay?
That's still being discussed. So
Outside of litigation?
outside of litigation, but this is their way, the carrot and the stick. This is their way of getting us to favorably join or say that we're okay with
Appeal.
the appeal. Now, that doesn't mean we agree with what they're appealing. It just says that we contest the appeal because we think this will help us get to a final decision quicker. Yeah. There's still ongoing litigation between Conroe and Magnolia. But going back to the breach case, and I can't get too much into it, but Quadvest and Woodland Oaks owes penalties, interest, past pumpage. It's about $11 to $11.5 million. So there is conversation about just getting paid for the past pumpage and also the requirement that they stay current going forward. And that all other fees, penalties, interest would be decided at the time that the case is finally settled. So we stand to gain an $8 to $9 million infusion of cash, maybe in the next 30 days, maybe in the next 6 months. Yeah. That said, because of the drought, our finances are in better shape. There is enough money to fund all of the reserves. It would require a budget amendment. And there is also money there to cover a couple of the projects that we need to get done.
And pay the debt service.
Well, we would continue, that doesn't affect the debt service.
Are you collecting just the dollars owed, or you're collecting penalty and legal fees?
We are deferring legal fees. We're willing to defer legal fees, penalties, and interest for that to be concluded at the time that a final ruling comes from the Supreme
But
Court.
they would pay actual cost of water.
What they owe us plus going forward on actual pumping fees.
And a couple of questions. Looking back from whatever the date of settlement, SGRA has in turn incurred all of these costs that you just indicated could be set aside. Question then is, as a MUD 46 representative, we've paid our portion of that to Woodlands Water Agency, who in turn has paid that to you. So are we going to recoup it as MUD 46? Any of those monies that you're
Keep in
giving,
mind-
that you're setting aside?
Keep in mind, the fees that you're paying are just like all the other 80 participants, other than the 4 that are.
I didn't ask the question properly, I'm sorry. Since the litigation began, we've incurred fees, MUD 46 residents.
You paid water rates that have those fees built into them.
Correct. So therefore, we've already incurred the cost. If part of your settlement includes setting aside some of those fees, interest and the like, it means that we are basically paying for the litigation of those two
I said
organizations.
we were deferring. And I hate to keep interrupting, but we're
No.
only deferring until there's a final ruling on whether the contracts are valid and incontestable.
Do we have an opportunity to approve or disapprove your actions as SGRA?
Yes.
So you're in effect taking the money that we've spent and making a decision of have we spent it well or have we not? And you're going to be the recipient of that additional funds.
Back to the GRP division, right, go in their budget. And if there is a if there is a surplus, there is the potential it would benefit the rate at a future budget.
Like I said, this is an important point to discuss in greater detail because your update's important, it's significant. And the implications of the actions that you're suggesting have an implication to the money that we've spent before and sets a precedent for how we deal with our contracts or lack of contract support and actions going forward. And I, for one, would take a stronger stand saying, hey, you signed a contract. We all went into it with eyes open and you chose not to fulfill your obligations counter to the contract. You've now lost the procedural concerning the breach. Now you want to settle. Good news. But we're still holding the bag or have paid for the bag. That's my point of view. So I'd say going forward, I wouldn't want to do that. Just my point of view.
I understand.
And there are 4 other people here who could overrule me.
Well, as I said, right now, we're only deferring it until future ruling.
Yeah, but the key point that you said was that we do not have the right to contest your resolution to the expenditure of MUD 46's monies. And that I take exception to.
Yes. So we have these legal fees and those legal and into that cost structure.
Correct.
So if they agree to pay all the cost of the water, they will pay the cost of those legal fees, won't they? Because it's not a penalty, it's not interest, it's not legal fees. So we're gonna get back all the legal fees when they agree to pay the water. Isn't that correct?
That's built in to the fee. I mean, that's all the expenses within
Well,
GRP.
It's part of your overhead.
It's all part of, you've heard us say that there's $2 million in the GRP budget towards legal fees.
Right.
And so the goal would be to get it all back. No question. But
Instead
it's
of having everybody pay it a portion, a small little pro rata piece, the goal of chasing those, and I'm speaking from, our perception from the mud side, is the point of chasing those by the river authority is to place that expense solely on the party who caused those expenses to be incurred,
Correct.
which is the breaching party. But as it stands right now, everyone who pays rates pays a small piece of that. So if they agree to pay just the rate, then they're agreeing to pay their piece of those expenses up until current. So it doesn't get it all, but it gets whatever their pro rata piece, their GRP versus all
And
GRP.
the rest of it is negotiated with legal fees.
Correct. The issue of the small amounts, I have here at the time that we had this discussion back in August, the 22 budget was talking about for the SGRA GRP legal service summary, which I requested, and I believe Ed gave me, and this is a copy of it. At the time, we were looking at $2.1 million. No matter how you slice that, that little amount of money turns out to be a lot per mud. And yes, when I bring it down to the individual constituent in our district, it's a small number, small being hundreds of dollars. But it's a concern to our constituents. Hundreds of dollars in this economic environment is a lot of money.
What I'm hearing from Ed is that point is not being conceded in what's being discussed.
What he's suggesting, I'm agreeing with part of it. The idea of coming to a resolution, kudos to you and to your team. I mean, great. That's exactly what we should be doing. My only objection is we seem to, my assessment, nobody else's, to be willing to sacrifice. We took the initiative to stop them doing what they were doing. We paid for it, and our constituents paid for it as well. I don't want to give that money away easily. And I know that you want to settle it and move forward, and I got where you're coming from. If I was in your situation, I'd want to do the same thing too. But what are we offering the constituents in 26?
We have a disconnect on what we're talking about.
We haven't settled on anything.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. You haven't settled
All
yet.
we've done is said, you have to pay the past due pumpage. You have to stay current with current pumpage. And we will discuss the other items, the penalties, the interest, legal fees at a later date. That's all we said.
Yes, but you added just now that the MUDs do not have any authority in having you not accept the settlement. That you're going to make a settlement that's best for the SGRA. And that's all well and good. You're run by a separate board. But WWA is impacted by that decision because we're customers of you. Yes, through the Woodlands Division, I got that. But we still pay part of that cost. I just want to make sure that our constituents are getting back that money. I know you can't do it now, but I just would like to have the opportunity.
I'm happy to pass the message.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's all I asked for.
So in essence, they've agreed to pay their pro rata share of the legal fees. What we have to negotiate is the return of the money we have paid in a future point.
So I don't think, and again, I'm kind of handling it from the outside looking in, or talking about it from the outside looking in. From what I'm understanding, the quad, and again, this is just the quad vest piece. This isn't even the big dollar piece of the cities. This is just the small private user piece. So as to that small piece, relatively, they are not yielding on their position that they should not even have to pay those fees. They're still pursuing an appeal that the contract is not incontestable and valid. Sounds like what they're saying is we'll put this money for just the pumpage fees up with the river authority. We're not yielding on our position that we don't owe them, but we're willing to put those up with you while we continue to fight it out on appeals as to whether not just the attorney fees are owed in interest, but also whether the fees themselves are owed. So nobody's yielding anything, it doesn't sound like, other than to
Who
Who
holds the check?
try to push it along more quickly, it sounds like. Is that?
That's in essence what's occurring on the breach case.
It would help expedite it to the final courtroom, whatever
That's all
that
we're
is.
trying to do.
So to the point of my recommendation here, which is in front of you, is this something that the board wants to move forward on, or adjust and move forward on, or put on the side until we hear more from the SJRA and what they're doing with Quadvest and others?
I think this could drag on for a while. I'd like to
I
see
agree.
your spreadsheet with all these costs on it, so we just have an understanding.
I just need it updated by Ed. I mean, he provided me all of the data.
Right, well, I haven't seen it,
Okay.
you know, we weren't part of that. little-
Actually, it was attached to the August package.
I didn't-
There was a whole bunch of stuff that Shelley told me about that was attached. I did not
Yeah.
copy. So let me do this. With your help, Ed, if you could update for the last fiscal year, this report, I will then have it distributed by Shelley to all of the board members here.
We'll get started on.
Thank you, sir.
Fred, I had a question on the seventh item. This item here, it says recommendations by Schwartz, Page and Harding and the SJRA on the litigation and or negotiation strategy with the city of Conroe.
Correct.
And are you advocating potential litigation against the city of Conroe?
What I was recommending or suggesting is that we get recommendations from SPH as to what we should do. My personal point of view is irrelevant. It's what's best for the constituents of 46.
You know, I'm trying to understand what you have in mind.
In a perfect world, I would like to proceed against City of Conroe. That's my personal point of view.
Can we do that?
We can talk about that in closed session if you'd like.
And my point is, we have standing. Even though we do not control, manage, or oversight with SGRA, I understand that. But because we pay fees to the SGRA that supports that, we have legal standing, is my point of view.
We're starting to veer into conversation.
Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
it's privileged information.
Yeah. So what would you suggest, Brian,
You want to talk about that?
in closed session?
Yes.
If we have time, that would be a good idea. If not, well, yes, absolutely.
So on this item, let's just table it for now and move on. Okay. All right, next item is item number 15, receive an update on the spindle tree planting options. I believe Alan Hedegren is here today to talk about that. And
I think,
anyone else?
Jim, you were talking about giving an update. I understand.
Yeah, I just,
I
well,
don't care.
we still haven't received the property. If you remember, there were two portions in question. One I'll call the upper page next to Alan's home, and then the area along the detention
The
pond.
west side.
Where we were looking at putting in an irrigation system. We got a price for an irrigation system from the Woodlands Township, but the property is not theirs. It's owned by the Howard Hughes Corporation. So we're waiting for that property to be deeded to the Woodlands Township and then enter into discussions with the township about an interlocal for irrigating those existing trees and some other stuff.
I can expand on that just a little. So the trees for the one area are in,
The upper area near Allen's home.
those are in, we just have to plan accordingly with the weather. And on the other piece of property on, I guess the.
Deeding your property to the township.
So we're basically deeding the open space. And so when they did their research on it, we still own a part of it, but then there's some easements, I think that Centerpoint's own, so they're in the process of working on that still.
Okay.
So we're gonna get it done.
So you're talking about this property behind Allen's house?
So the
Or up on top of the hill?
behind Alan's house, when we went out in the
Right,
field together.
right.
Those are the trees that we're planting trees
Right.
there. So that's one piece.
Howard
But then-
Hughes will retain ownership of that.
Yes, but then the other piece is a totally different piece.
That's along the street.
Yes. That we're there,
That's Spindletop.
we have to deed the open space over, so then we can enter into, I guess, the
So
mud.
then, but
enter into an
46 can enter into an agreement with the township for irrigating and whatever else.
Okay. Has there been any progress on the on getting trees out there?
Well,
Or is that going to be something that, is that a step that you do?
earlier we're talking about no trees. Remember, we agreed just to irrigate it and kind of speed up the growth of the trees that are there.
Okay.
Trees have been planted along the other portion where there is no irrigation adjacent to the homes on the cul-de-sac.
Did we agree to do that?
Yes.
Did we agree to do that?
Well, I know
We discussed it.
Woodlands Water did, but
I think
Who
Jim
agreed to-
has talked with Chris Nunes and they agreed on splitting the cost of an irrigation system. It's top.
We've agreed, yes.
and I had a question about that. That was 15,000. Was that 15 a piece or 15?
My
Total.
recollection total.
Okay, so 7,500 a piece. Okay.
So I'm puzzled why the Woodlands wouldn't pay for that entirely. Because they do that throughout the Woodlands. They're gonna own the property. And why wouldn't the Woodlands, I mean, to me, I go back to the Woodlands, I mean, my neighborhood, you know, all the pathways, they manage that. And we now we're getting into an area that we typically haven't been in, and I would like to see the Woodlands maintain that system as a whole. I mean, I don't know why they would not, be honest with you. They may not like to, but to me, it's a continuation of their obligation they've always had. It just went derelict.
Well, and unfortunately, we have not deeded it over to them yet.
Oh, I know,
So
you're going to.
We are.
So once they do that, it's just,
Conversations just began, so
Yeah.
I think maybe later on, that's another conversation.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah, no,
probably another agenda item, because conceptually, we kind of agreed that splitting it was something we'd entertain. If the board doesn't want to entertain that, we probably need to have it as an agenda item to,
discuss it with the Woodlands Township.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, how you guys feel, I'll go to the Woodlands Township and do my 3 minutes.
I'm
And-
kind of feeling like, we're supposed to spend more time arguing about our split than it's worth.
Well,
Just-
but
just go do
it sets a precedent. Right, we do one neighborhood, we do another neighborhood, we do another neighborhood. We have the thing with MUD 47 and the cameras.
Right.
You know, they was it us in the cameras? I mean, you begin to do all these things and,
It's actually right adjacent to our property.
well,
We don't care.
so
We
I
don't
understand
own
that. We don't, we have a lot of adjacent property. But I don't know why the Woodlands Township wouldn't just take care of it. It's another irrigation process that they use. And they're set up to do this and, maybe it's, that's not going to satisfy Alan. He has another goal. Right? He wants trees planted on that hillside. You mean, and we start splitting things, the next split we'll have is planting, a couple hundred trees on that hillside. And I would like to, get the township involved and then get the township involved with further planting. And,
Mhm.
once we get, baited into paying for one, we'll be paying for the second or paying for more than the second. And sometimes, I mean, Alan wants the trees on the hillside. I don't think that's gonna satisfy you, is it, Alan?
That's right.
He's not. So, we might as well go for the long haul.
and irrigating or planting on the hillside is a MUD 46 decision, period,
And I
not a
think
township.
That's his goal. That started out to be his goal. And this other irrigation along Spindletop Road was a side issue. But his goal is to plant trees on the hillside, and that's going to take a lot more money and a lot more time. And I think it's a discussion that you get the township to fix this, and then you start talking about the hillside. And that's, what was that distance, 1,500 feet?
I think we need to,
7,000?
I think we need to put out one fire at a time.
On fire.
Right now, we're working on the irrigation system. There's no point planting trees without the irrigation system. We've been there, done that. Last time the trees died. So let's get the irrigation system done. And then we'll bring up the discussion of the trees. Agree?
I may interject one point. Chris suggested that we provide him our plan for planting on the slope so that he can understand better the irrigation required for the upper upper area and the slope together.
Okay.
So we can't really move forward with the upper irrigation without knowing what trees we're gonna plant on the slope.
Okay.
One irrigation system, not piecemeal and having to add water taps, at various times in the in the project.
Okay. That's not our level of expertise, but do you have a suggestion for who can come up with that plan?
I'm working with Woodlands Green, Trees for Houston, and the township to try to buy tree or get money for trees. And once we understand the size of trees, that will help us with spacing. I've been working with an arborist as well, which has made recommendation of the spacing as well. So as soon as I get funding for the trees, we'll be able to lay a map out of that slope, which will then drive the, what the needs for the irrigation.
So
Well, the way-
David, one comment that he just made, that I think he's talking about going to get the funding himself and plant the trees on Mud 46 property rather than ask Mud 46 for the funding.
I understand what he said, but he also said that, he's not gonna be satisfied with the irrigation on Spindletop Road. He wants the irrigation on the hillside. And, to me, it's, I'm just stating, we had a goal when we first began this, and that was to write a letter. Telling people it's okay to plant trees on that hillside, and then somehow it's morphed into this other project.
And
And
we wrote the letter, and the letter went to Chris Stevens, and we were asking him to provide the trees on the slope. And he declined.
who's the letter to?
Chris Nunes,
And he
he's
is
the general manager of the,
Now the chief operating officer,
of what?
the Woodlands Township.
So they are incurring quite a bit of the cost of this. Now, this is his project. It's on our land, and the Woodlands Township is paying a part of the cost. So I think we're moving along at a nice pace. I don't think we need to act on anything today, just get an update on what's going on. So, yeah. All right. Anything else, Alan? All right. Thank you. Let's move on. All right. Item number 16 on the agenda, review and consider the approval of the district's fiscal year 21-22 draft audit report. John?
I want to make just a quick comment for the newbies here. The strategy here is to have you approve the audit conceptually as you see it today. If over the next week or so you want adjustments, minor non-substantial adjustments, we'll include those. And then we'll get you the final audit. We're on a short time frame. The deadline to get it to TCEQ is before your next MUD meeting.
Okay.
So what we're asking today is to approve this draft to be submitted with any changes that may come up from legal or our staff or other board members.
I appreciate your time on brief. I really don't have a lot to tell you. I noticed that we had a significant reduction in fund balance in the general fund, but that was planned. So it mostly had to do with water meters that we were buying. So you're right on budget, and district still looks very healthy even after that significant reduction. So with that, I'll just open up questions if anybody has any regarding.
we've had conversation about reducing the operating fund further. And I guess a question for you is, do you see any concern about that?
Well, you've got in the general fund, fund balance at the end of 9/30, roughly $2 million, and you have probably your annual operating expenditures are in the neighborhood of 1.2. So just roughing it 2 months of fund balance in expenditures, and that's a comfortable place to be. I don't know if you want to get too much below that, but I certainly don't. I think that the reduction of fund balance was probably a healthy thing for the taxpayer, for the customers. But I don't know how much further you'd want to go, because you have $14 million annual budget roughly, with ignoring those meters. That's really up to the board. You know, that's a big discussion for every month, you know, what should my fund balance be? And I don't think anybody can give you a legitimate answer to that. It's really where your comfort level is. How much do you need sitting there in case you have a major water line repair that you didn't anticipate or a disaster, you know, whatever. What's your comfort zone?
A minimum of 6 months, I think. Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I mean, you see a lot of mud districts.
Yeah, and
But-
3 to 6 months seems like where everybody wants to be.
Right.
But
I wanted to hear your comment on
right,
that.
yeah, I'm very cautious about, as the auditor, as the independent auditor, I'm very cautious about telling you where your fund balance should be, but I certainly
It'd
don't.
be fair for you to say, I've seen others who've gotten into trouble at some level.
Oh, well, you know, it's fair to say I've seen, believe it or not, them go bankrupt if assessed value, appraised value takes a dive in their everything, so.
But is it also true that we have the ability to raise water rates
Oh, sure.
to compensate
Sure.
for that?
And you have the ability to raise maintenance tax and so forth.
Somewhat with the current legislative
Yeah.
environment.
So as I understand it, we have this for a month and we can make comments
Couple of
and,
weeks.
okay,
Yeah.
and then vote on it, and then vote on it next.
We say a couple of weeks, we don't meet for 4 weeks, so.
Yeah, let me kind of run down. We're hoping for approval today.
Okay.
Everybody has about 2 weeks to mull it over, maybe take a read. If they see the typos, they see, maybe you don't like we describe something, you'd like to describe it a little differently or some additional disclosures, we can certainly add them. Our goal is to finalize these reports the first week of February, get them over to SPH so that they can file them with the TCEQ mid-February.
Okay.
Should our comments, if any, be directed to you, to Maureen, or to who?
We usually.
Or Jim? Okay,
Send them to
fine.
Jim and then he'll direct them to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have one comment on page 48. The last column under resident of district, across from my name. I am a resident of the district.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I go to 24. Oh, you got a complete, no wonder,
How come
no
you
wonder
got-
I like this one so much, yeah.
We're hiding it from you?
That's
All right.
the water agency audit.
Ah,
You need
Ah.
it for my 46.
got it, got the wrong one, okay.
Some names need to be changed. Well,
No, those are tax corrections.
Right here.
Who got Cambridge?
No,
Where did they put it?
How did they know?
What's that?
there we go.
Okay.
You know, comments, questions?
Spare copy of the full.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the draft fiscal year 21-22 draft audit report. I need a second. Is there discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the draft audit report, say aye. And opposed? All right. Bet. Thanks, John. Item 17, grant exemptions from taxation for 2023 and the adoption of a resolution in connection here therewith.
This is your annual adoption of exemptions. For 2022, you adopted a $20,000 over 65 and disabled exemption along with the maximum 20% residential homestead exemption. All the other MUDs and the Woodlands have also adopted the maximum residential homestead exemption. So this is the exemption that will appear on your tax bills that you get in October. So it's confusing to do this at the beginning of the year, but it won't actually show up until October or so this year. If y'all want to keep the exemptions the same, or if you want to modify them, now would be the time to talk about that. And then we need a motion on resolution for the.
What are the other much done? Same numbers?
Same for residential homestead. The over 65 and disabled varies between 10,000 and 30,000, and you're right in the middle of 20.
Well, I'd like to.
Me to make the proposal. Who'd like to make it?
I would like to keep the 20,000, which is the max. Everyone has that for the homestead, 20%, I'm sorry, 20% for the homestead exemption. I would like to raise MUD 46 to $30,500. I want MUD 46 to be higher than the other MUDs by just a smidgen. That's my, I guess, resolution or proposal.
Any discussion on that?
Do we have any other proposals or requests?
20,000,
You want to go to 30?
I want to go to
35.
30.5.
30.5, right?
A little over 28,500.
In tax revenue lost. Yeah. So it's not material to your budget.
And that's no gain by me because I'm not over 65.
I'm still far over. I'll second your motion.
All right. Well, do we have any discussion? All right. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? There are no nays. The resolution passes. Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 18, receive the San Jacinto River Authority Woodlands Division report. And we have Chris and we have Ed and we have Dan. Which one?
Since Dan, he has lots of stuff to go over, so
All right.
plus he's on a very short timeline. He has to pick up kids quickly.
Update on wastewater strategic plan. Page 45 in your packet. There's a one-page summary. It includes 3 recommendations that I will go into more detail. And I do want to point out, we have been working on this planning effort for over a year now. We really appreciate the discussions and input from all the MUDs and stakeholders up to this point. George, I appreciate you sitting in on the stakeholder meeting. I think there's been a lot of good discussion, decisions, and, a lot more to come also as we move forward with this time. Also in your packet is the meeting summary from the previous January 10th stakeholder meeting. And then furthermore, on the Google Drive is the slides from that stakeholder meeting, along with a draft technical report from the consultant summarizing the planning efforts from November 2021 up till now. It does not include the recommendations, conclusions, because it was a draft before the last stakeholder meeting. But if you do have questions, comments on that, let us know by the end of the month. And also all the appendices are on there too, available for y'all to look at. So what I really wanted to go back to was sheet 45 here, or page 45 in your packet, and the 3 recommendations. So during the January 10th stakeholder meeting, SJRA provided our recommendations to the group, which further was voted on by the voting stakeholder members, which includes the 11 MUD districts that SJRA serves. So going through those 3 bullets, the first one is to enter into a phase 2 analysis and further refine the development of alternative 9. And that is building a new NBR facility adjacent to plant 1 in one phase in approximately 2027 is what we have been. And that exhibit is on page 46 in your packet, showing how that would be essentially constructed and where a preliminary layout. An additional stipulation to that recommendation that was voted on by stakeholders is the anticipated maximum cost of phase 2 being $500,000 and 6 months. So this is a very condensed phase 2, looking at this one option further in terms of
primarily the scope items are related to capacity. What does the capacity of this new facility need to be? And also looking at additional, or improving the cost estimates, looking at the financial aspect further, refining the rate impacts to the end users and customers, and really digging into that with a lot more detail. So that first bullet that was voted on by the voting stakeholder members, and the vote was 9 out of 11, so the majority in favor of that recommendation.
Alternate 9.
Of moving forward with alternative 9 into a phase 2.
Okay.
The next bullet, which was unanimously voted on in favor by the stakeholders, is to proceed with the land acquisition adjacent to wastewater treatment facility 1. That was one where when we got down to 2 remaining alternatives, both of those alternatives utilize that land adjacent to treatment facility 1. So we do, as a recommendation, want to proceed with that in the near term. Third bullet also was common between the remaining alternatives that went into that final stakeholder meeting. And that recommendation is to commence the preliminary engineering efforts for the conveyance alternative that came out of the wastewater strategic plan and the removal of 5 lift stations by constructing a new gravity line coming into plant 1. There's an exhibit on page 47 that shows a high level view of what that would look like. Going into the preliminary engineering phase, that'd be looking further into what that routing needs to be. Is there land acquisition that needs to be looked at? How would all the flow lines of the gravity sewer be connected? Where does it come into plant 1, et cetera? So those are the 3 recommendations that will be coming to y'all for a vote in the February MUD meeting. So I'll open it up to questions. George, I'll let you, if you want to add anything that I'm leaving out here or forgetting.
I guess I had in my mind, you were going to come to us in February and ask us for approval to do either alternative 9 or I'll just call it alternative 1 to R&R. Is that wrong?
So what we plan to put on, correct me if I'm wrong, on the MUD agendas is in favor or against the stakeholder recommendation. So it's not going back to choose one or 2, we'll say.
Question, and building off what George said, and before I begin on building off what George said, if you haven't seen the report that George did, it's excellent. I have a copy of it here, not the final one, but he went back and compared the average flow for facility number 1 and 2 versus the operating percent against the total capacity. And it's great work. So kudos to you for doing a super job. Have you seen this report that he did?
We have seen.
We have a copy.
Okay. Well, the data came from Chris, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you want to give your assessment of it? You want me to just, because it's your work.
So you have on the agenda a topic called 9.1.
Correct.
And, we can talk about that there if you want. I wanted to just, at this moment, clarify what it is that this
You do-
board will be asked to vote on in February. It doesn't. I must be misunderstanding what y'all are planning.
So the stakeholder recommendation at the January 10th meeting.
Right.
Was to move forward with alternative 9 into a phase 2 for no longer than 6 months and up to $500,000.
Right.
Correct.
That's what we're asking this MUD and the other MUDs to vote on in February.
And
And
also,
then after that, there will be more detail and we'll vote again after 6 months,
Right, 6, 8 months.
6 to 8 months.
But is this to the exclusion of what Dan called 9.1?
So
That's how I interpret it.
I don't,
the way I see 9.1, as we
Well, you
discussed,
dubbed it that. I don't know what the real number is.
we don't know either.
Okay.
I think that's starting to catch on. That, in my mind, is really what phase 2 is going to be helping further define the capacity aspect of that 9.1 option and how that may come into play. So I would say the recommendation, what would be voted on in February is gonna be, referring to alternative 9. But I think that alternative 9 will be further evaluated in terms of 9.1
And
capacity and refined in the phase 2 analysis.
Right, let me just add this. To me, 9 and 9.1 are roughly the same.
Correct. Yeah, I agree with that.
We're not saying the plant has to be rebuilt at 7.8 MGD. We're saying with phase 2, we're going to figure out exactly what it should be built at. 7.8 was decided 20, 30, 40 years ago. That may or may not be the right number. So phase 2 is going to say, how big does the plant need to be? Now, keep in mind, we have contractual obligations to all the MUDs, all 11 of the MUDs and the Woodlands, for 5.86 million gallons. So as of today, correct me if I'm wrong, I cannot build a plant for less than I've sold in capacity. So when you're looking at those numbers that George prepared, right, plant 1 is about 3.2 MGD after 3 to 4 years. But I have sold all of the MUDs 5.8.
And that sale was the best and final 6th.
That was the 6th.
So there was nothing left over after you had that best and final 6. Is that?
And
That was the background, right?
well, you're right.
So
So
you're nodding your head. No.
No, so the sixth and final
Sixth and
was, each district was supposed to go and determine how much capacity water and sewer they needed through the next 10-year cycle, which I think was through like 2027 or something. Now, that, a lot of that projection information came from the development company because they own the undeveloped parcels and had the best available information at that time about what a projected use would be for a vacant piece of land. Of course, projections are
Right.
inaccurate as
Yeah,
soon as
yeah.
they're written down. But it wasn't to soak up all the capacity that was in the system. It was however much everybody needs. And then what the sixth and final did is it said, okay, you got this number of millions of dollars of historical cost that was spent to create this system. And then whatever additional capital improvements were needed as part of the sixth and final was added on top of that. So let's say it's 250 million and we need 10 million more. So we're at 260. You take that 260 million divided by however many number of units everybody says that they need. That's what the cost per unit was. But there was some remaining, what we, internally dubbed slack capacity informally, that was still in the system because folks didn't say that they needed it for that projected time period. In the supplemental agreements for the sixth and final, what was decided was that any district that needed additional capacity over and above what they had initially estimated could get it on a first come, first served basis to the extent that it was available at the same price as the sixth and final accounting. And those funds would have to go into the R&R fund to help fund additional infrastructure. So that was the fairest way to handle it because everybody paid the same price going in. Districts frankly had an incentive to overestimate how much capacity they would need because after the sixth and final, the big consequence of the sixth and final was that if a district underestimated how much they needed, or there's some redevelopment, that happens, and let's say an improvement is needed to be able to there's a bottleneck in the system. Maybe there's capacity at the plant, but there's some bottleneck somewhere else to be able to get there, and to clear up that bottleneck is going to cost $5 million. Well, under the old, when we were doing interim accountings, that 5 million would have got tacked on top of that 260. So it'd be 265 and everybody pays a share of that 5 million. After the sixth and final, he who needs pays. So whichever district needed that extra.
Which is the way it should be.
Has to pay the full 5 million.
So
So that's how it is now. If there's not slack capacity that's available.
So in that 6th and final documentation,
Mhm.
did you identify the slack capacity that was available?
No,
So it's theoretically, it doesn't exist.
well, it has to be, it's very, I'm getting out of my lane in terms of
That's what
engineering.
These guys do.
But my understanding is
Fine
it's
job.
specifically based on parcels. So you have to look at where's a piece of land that needs capacity and determine from there, is there a bottleneck in the system? It's not just about the plant capacity, it's all the lines,
Right.
booster pumps, all that
So,
stuff.
but that analysis would exist or would be created when and if that event ever occurred.
Correct, which has happened. There's been 4 districts so far that have purchased slack, incremental slack
Taking that
capacity.
back. And that's written.
Yes. Supplemental
Identified
agreements.
supplemental agreements.
Question for Chris. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I wrote this on a napkin because I didn't want to take real notes and put it in my stuff here. I was under the impression that the development company has approximately 500 commercial acres available for development. Is that correct?
In the woodlands, I have over 700 acres, but in the River Authority's boundary.
That's what I'm referring to, yes.
Just
Okay.
making sure.
And I also understand within the Woodlands that the development company has property that is not fully leased out and it's fairly substantial. Is that capacity included in the 6th and final, even though it's not being utilized for the last several years?
So to answer your question, yes. So you'll have like, I think Dan had said Dan Colcourse had said there's 3 office buildings in the Woodlands and that go to wastewater plant 1 that are completely empty. Right?
Correct.
They have some actually, but.
Right, like the towers, they're fully leased, but they're not occupied. So that will drive those numbers down.
That would actually drive the numbers up once they get occupied.
Right.
So is that where the slack capacity is going to be sucked up?
That's your actuals.
Okay.
That's not the
Yeah.
purchase capacity.
Okay, good.
So
People
the,
moved out.
the purchase
People
capacity
moved out,
issue,
taking space.
when he talks about how much has been sold to the MUDs, that's actual purchase capacity that was based on those projections through 2027 and these 4 smaller incremental purchases of slack
To me,
capacity.
this is all very critical information that dovetails into the good work that George did and also Dave's point about utilization and capacity and not building significantly more than we'll need for the next, pick a number, 20 years, 30 years.
And that's what phase 2 is going to look at.
That's fine.
That's, yeah.
So we still have the right and the ability to adjust alternative 9 to whatever we wish to once we have more credible data that will be done with phase 2.
And I fully expect the wastewater plant, right now wastewater plant 1, 7.8 MGD. I fully expect that to go down.
Okay.
I just don't know how far, but I don't expect it to go up in any regards. It should only go down from where we are today.
So
Why do you say
Chris,
that?
what you're saying today is really what I've been hoping to hear from y'all for several months.
Exactly.
And so I'm glad to hear it. I guess I had a couple of, I'll go jump to the end, as it were. I had a couple of comments that I wanted to recommend as, a bottom line, direction from MUD 46. And one of them is really that we ought to size the plant based on real need and not be limited by old contracts that if they don't
I'm
break up
listening.
on you.
I'm listening,
And
but I'm getting nervous.
well, my thinking is we need to size the plant based on real need. And if the contract is the holdup, that forces you to build something much bigger than you ever need, we need to renegotiate somehow that contract.
Let me touch on that.
And
The contract-
Brian might want to comment also. I think he's
Sure
not
he will.
clear
I'm
level.
just- One thing, when you had said the baseline for 46, I appreciate that because we do look at each individual MUD. However, the wastewater plant does serve the entire community.
And
So-
and any one of us here may end up moving and living.
Just look at the community as a whole. So if 46 says, Chris, this is your direction, that's good. I'll pay attention to that. But if the other 10 MUDs in the Woodlands say, Chris, go here, I have to follow majority in that
And
case.
we have a trustee sitting here next to me.
Mhm.
And I would hope he will carry the message up to the Board of Trustees to try to get a consensus.
Sure.
Is it some
Again,
type
we
of-
expect the trustee vote
One beer.
next meeting.
Sure.
No, March.
March would be the trust.
So as I understand it, next meeting, the board votes to tell the trustee how to vote.
Correct.
Okay.
But I was under the impression that you were considering having this board vote unanimously to send a letter to the other MUD presidents and trustees. Is that still your idea?
I guess I hadn't talked about writing a letter, you know, we can.
Well, we talked about it. I just don't know if you want to proceed with that. Because I think it's good that we set the example. We did so in our budget preparation. We set the example. Is this something you would like to set as an example for MUD 46?
I would like to see whatever plants are built to satisfy the real need of the community.
I agree with that.
You know, and you have growth projections from the development company. And they, you know, we aren't asking to trim any projection, make it a real need. My heart feels that, you know, that if you build a plant that's big enough to last for 50 years and it's going to take 20 years before you actually get to needing to ramp up I tend to think in terms of ramp up production, but ramp up processing of wastewater, you're doing it with a plant with 20-year-old equipment.
I agree. And I've been in this business for almost 25 years, and if I have a plant that's too big, it's more of a headache to me.
Right.
I need the plant to be the right size with just the right amount of redundancy, because if
Right.
I have too much slack capacity, I have so much wrangling I have to do. So it's a benefit to all of us to right size the plant.
Right.
So I'm on board entirely.
And so I'm thinking, as far as contracts go, we're not adversarial parties. We're with you.
Yeah.
But I cannot redo capacity for the Woodlands or just for MUD 46. All the MUDs would have to agree to
I agree
redo the
with that.
capacity.
That'd be ideal.
Right. Right.
So Brian and I had a conversation yesterday. And during this phase 2, we will be looking at the SFDUEs and the volume associated with each SFDUE.
Good.
And if, you know, my recollection is under the 6th final accounting, we were at 217 gallons per connection for SFDUE. If it comes in at 170, and that includes current plus future, you know, to a certain point. Let me finish. Let me finish, George.
Okay.
But if it comes in at 170 or 175, we bring that back to y'all, to all of the MUDs.
Good.
And say, here's the true volume, whatever the
Good.
volume is.
Good.
And if everybody's agreeing to that, Brian has indicated that we would have to issue supplemental agreements for everybody to sign on to that number, and there won't be a rebate from 6 million down to whatever the new number is. There is no money to rebate. All it means is we're building a plant that is right sized.
Good.
And that's what we've committed to you over the last 4 meetings. That we would do an analysis of the flow in the plant and we would come back to y'all. That's what we committed 4 meetings ago. And we've said it every time you've raised the question.
I appreciate, that's really the goal I have.
Okay.
Is to, and I'm thinking there's 2 pieces of the 6th and final accounting. There's a number of equivalent dwellings, and you get that from the projection from the development
Well,
company.
we got that from Woodlands Water and the developer.
Yes. And the other half of it is historical, factual, here's what the flow going to the wastewater plant is. And whatever that number is, that's what I want to see used. And a lot of times y'all have talked about using the number that's in the 6th and final accounting of 217, and what we see is significantly.
That's what we used during this initial analysis to compare apples to apples.
So I want to hear, every time we've talked about it before, when we go back and look at the notes, it doesn't show that we're going to actually cut the flow.
We said we would do the analysis.
I've heard it orally, and I've heard it again today, and it's recorded today. So that's great.
May I ask a couple questions? Since I do this for a living, are you going to have value engineering in the phase 2? for the cost estimate?
We will refine the cost estimate based on the flow. The value engineering would come with PER or
Okay.
design phase.
Okay, good. As long as you're thinking about that and putting it in there. What about your permitting for the outfalls, the permitting with the TCEQ? Are you gonna look at that in phase 2?
We're not gonna look at that in phase 2. We're gonna start looking at that more in the PER phase. It's not as much of an issue since what we're gonna do on the technical side, we're gonna leave the outfall the same. Since we're gonna build a new plant and leave the existing plant in operation, then when the new plant comes online, shut down the old plant, we're gonna keep the same outfall. So therefore, in TCEQ, it's gonna be a major amendment, but they're not gonna have as much of a concern because capacity is likely gonna drop.
Okay,
So
okay. Those are just roadblocks
they are.
permitting.
But if we were trying to increase the flow, it'd be a bigger roadblock, a bigger hurdle than going down.
And I would just want the methodology of how you're gonna look at revising the loading per equivalent single family connection. I'm sure it's gonna be in the report.
There is some discussion in the draft report that's on the Bill draft.
That's all I have.
Okay.
And I'll just add, sometimes those numbers, like when you look at them, they don't make sense, right? Like it doesn't make sense. Like you're not seeing the flows that are being projected. And I will say that that's pretty standard in wastewater. And it's because they're also having to design to additional standards, like 4 times the flow, 4 times the loading, minimum loading per connection. So sometimes it doesn't always match up in people's minds.
Which is a good point to tie in. Ed and I had this conversation earlier, to tie in your question about TCEQ. TCEQ has certain requirements that we have to meet. So the flow coming through the plant is one thing, but the loading being the BOD and the TSS and all that, they have different criteria. That number back 50 years ago was down here, and now it's up here. So it used to be 200, now it's 300 and 400, right? Because of all the water saving features and garbage disposals, you're having more food come through and less water. So one thing is, we need to make sure when we right size the basins, it's for flow and for the loading as well. Appreciate it.
Good question. All right, let's move on. Do you have anything on the infrastructure?
Yes. Congress passed the omnibus bill in late December. That included the monies that Congressman Crenshaw was pursuing for Bear Branch Dam. So that basically the projects in the omnibus bill are approved. We're awaiting on appropriation. So that's pending. The other infrastructure funds that we've been chasing, what we're seeing so far is the majority of those are headed towards low to moderate income areas, rural communities, and entities that have administrative and enforcement orders. And the Woodlands has none of those. So we are working with our federal consultant to see if the Houston delegation would be interested in offering new legislation this session to modify those funding formulas. And we're talking to other river authorities and municipalities that also are in the same dilemma that we are, to see if they would also sign on to help work other delegations. So that's working. Bear Branch Dam low flow vault update. Mentioned back in November that we were ordering the vault lid because that had a 13-week delivery time. That's due to be delivered in March. Plans will be complete in January, so we should be able to have a contractor ready to go as soon as the vault is in March. Bear Branch Dam drainage project. I think there's a sheet in the packet that says it's underway. We are now at about 8% complete. Surveyors out working, and
That's it.
But project's underway, and no invoices have been received, but they are working.
All right.
And they are on a 9-month schedule.
Okay. Very good.
Question for you, Ed. First of all, thanks to you and Chris for clarifying what George, Dave, and I have been looking at concerning the wastewater treatment. Can you help me understand how Connie Curtis fits within the organization?
Sure.
And what our communication should be with her? Should we work through Chris, through you, through her, through Dan? don't know.
So last October, Jace did a reorganization of the senior management team. Previously, I had all the Woodlands and the GRP plus engineering plus GIS. And another individual had SCADA, Highlands, Lake Conroe, and flood management. With the reorganization, Connie now has all technical services, so she has engineering, IT, SCADA, and GIS. And I have all the operating divisions. So I have Woodlands, GRP, Lake Conroe, flood management, and Highlands. So if it's an engineering matter, technical matter, it goes to Connie. If it's an operations matter, it can come to me. Chris is one of my direct reports.
Okay.
Good.
So you went to a functional layout, basically.
Jason always thought that this would be a good way to separate actions and directions within.
It's a good balance, check and balance.
And I can get Jim an org chart so that he can share it with you, but.
Well, just feedback for you and for Chris, initial conversations with her and her response and feedback, she's been terrific. So.
But she has a consulting community and 16 years experience and very, very professional.
Yep, and articulate, and he gets right to the point, which I like. And she's numbers oriented, which a lot of us like.
All right,
Other questions?
let's move on. We gotta move it along here. Item 19, real quickly, the Spring Creek detention study.
Yes, sir.
You wanna?
We have an internal meeting on the 23rd and a stakeholder meeting on the 30th. This is for the MUDs that have been part of the Spring Creek Detention Project. And we will know from that stakeholder meeting whether I'll say the westernmost detention pond out of the two could be optimized and downsized on the assumption that property owner would be willing to talk to us about creating detention on his property with 1.1 million solar panels being constructed.
And that meeting on the 30th, it's in the conference room or in the training center at the sewer plant.
That was asked of me last month, and David, I know that there's been a flyer on it, but I personally do not know. But, you know, the stakeholder meeting on Spring Creek Detention. Do you
I
remember?
think it said the Woodlands conference room, but
Is that the boardroom? I call it the boardroom.
No, it probably, it's a big enough crowd, it'd probably be the training.
but it should be, I think it said.
Last time we met in the boardroom. Now I got this foot here and I don't want to make 2 trips, you know.
We're
We'll
gonna
get-
commit to
we'll-
clarifying that and sending it out. For the meeting.
That's all I've got.
All right, item 20, do we want to say that we already talked about
Did.
item 9 and 9.1? Okay. Item 21, the attorney report.
Pledge session just opened, not much to report there yet. We're monitoring it as in prior sessions.
All right. Item 22, the amendment of policy number RNS 14 regarding special handling or adjustment to customer accounts connection with, but not limited to implementation of Public Utility Commission of Texas rules relating to Senate Bill number 3. This is just something that we're already doing right now, but what they did was they modified our operating policy to, because we have some operators out there that are abusing some of their customers, so we're,
Not us.
Doesn't change anything.
it doesn't change anything for us. It just codifies what we're doing already. And I'm going to make a motion that we approve the updated policy manual, number RNS 14 regarding the special handling of customers who, basically, let me put this in, whenever the weather gets bad, we can't turn their water off, okay? And I'm going to make a motion that we approve the modified resolution to RNS 14. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, and opposed? All right. That passes. Number 23, discussion regarding the designation of new meeting date and time. Do we want to discuss that this time? Everyone's here. Anyone have any comment? I'm happy with where we're at.
Fine.
So today, we won't finish, right? We really wanted to go into executive session and finish off Fred's.
I agree.
And so
We
You know,
had,
that would be, you know, another 15, 20 minutes.
we were wanting to maybe move the meeting later on in the day where we didn't have meetings afterward.
Or a different time day where you could.
Is there a proposal? Anybody?
You know what? You bring up a good point because we have people who like to talk.
Well,
Can we switch? Can we switch with Mud?
He said, no, they want to keep theirs.
Okay. We change it to a different day.
Who's on the late slot on Tuesday?
You don't want to go
Okay.
after that.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, we have a spot in between the meetings on Tuesday that opens up about 1:30 and is clear until.
Well, I have worse. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about I make a suggestion? The people who have a lot of questions, before the meeting, ask the pertinent questions to the pertinent individuals. And that way we don't waste meeting time.
We're always available we like that approach
Okay.
to get with us. And
That's the way I do, and when I ask questions, I do it during the month, not during the meetings.
The
So,
problem is when we get the answers to those questions for, let's say, me to communicate that to the rest of the board, I fall in violation to the Open Meeting Act. So my problem, and I asked Shelley this earlier, either this week or last week, how do I get documents to 2 or 3 of you folks and several other people in other MUDs? And to me, it's a head scratcher. I don't know how to do that effectively.
So you can route information that you want distributed to Jim, and Jim can distribute it. What's prohibited is not the dissemination of information. What's prohibited is the liberation of district business. That's what's prohibited.
Oh, okay.
So
So I can send information out.
well, I always caution my boards, it's a fine line to not have directors send stuff directly out, because
That's what I mean.
someone could inadvertently say, well, hey, what do you think about this? And somebody else chimes in, and all of a sudden.
That's the way I've been operating.
So if you
Based
go
on,
through Jim, it prevents that.
okay.
Because he's sending it out, it prevents deliberation. He can send it out through BCC, which prevents a refile.
Perfect.
okay,
Thank you.
so let's do that. All right. General Manager's report.
Quick item, MUD 47 and MUD 60 have agreed to put out a message to their customers, kind of a recap of the past 12 months. And we're recommending that each of the MUDs may consider that. We've got a template put together. What we'll do is put an agenda item on your next month's agenda with the sample that MUD 46 and MUD 47 and MUD 60 put together. If you've got ideas that you think would be appropriate in this one-page document, let John Geiger know, and we'll be sure and put those. But I think that it's worthwhile for all the MUDs to do it rather than just 1 or 2.
Great communication. Yeah.
Can you forward each of us the template?
We will, yeah. We're going to send that. It'll be in your packet, and we'll send it in advance as well. And the other stuff I've got, I can present next month. It's critical.
All right, item 25, the Woodlands Water Trustee Report. Dave or
Woodlands Water.
Trustees.
Trustee?
Oh, well, Fred went.
You want to report anything? Other than Eric Cutterson?
Am I allowed to talk about him?
You're allowed to say a new GM was hired.
There we go. And a new general manager has been hired, and we took a position on district director, yours activity, and that was all discussed here. So obviously that's out. That was the key points. What do you think?
I think so.
Went, called into the Lone Star Conservation District where they were talking about having core wells drilled, and they were proposing that they would come to the Woodlands Water and ask for money. And I was wondering, did that happen?
No.
Didn't happen in my trust
They
area.
haven't asked for, they were looking for $1.8 million per well for 2 wells.
Extensometer.
Extensometer and core sample.
Mm-hmm.
Sir? No communication to me.
All right, recess to closed section. Do we have anything?
Not-
Let's do it later. Okay. All right. Discuss matters for placement on the future agenda. We have only one thing. We need to talk about the recommendation with the trustee and the strategic wastewater. We already talked about that. Does
And the
anyone-
customer message.
Yes, and the customer message. All right. Without further ado, I adjourn the meeting.